The dust kicked up around Clara Brennan's worn boots as she tried to corral 3 young children through the general store in White River, Arizona territory, her hands trembling from exhaustion and worry about how she would pay for the meager supplies in her basket. It was September of 1882, and the late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the doorway, illuminating the flour dust that hung in the air like tiny stars while 5-year-old Thomas tugged at her skirt, asking for peppermint candy they could not afford. "Not today, sweetheart," Clara whispered, her voice catching as she smoothed his unruly brown hair. She adjusted 3-year-old Margaret on her hip while keeping an eye on 7-year-old Elizabeth, who stood quietly by the fabric bolts, her thin face showing more understanding than any child her age should possess. The shopkeeper, Mr. Henderson, cleared his throat as Clara approached the counter with her sparse selections. "That will be $2.15, Miss Brennan." Clara's stomach dropped. She had counted her coins 3 times that morning and knew she only had $1.70 to her name. "I apologize, Mr. Henderson. I will have to put back the sugar and the coffee." "The coffee, too?" His eyebrows rose. "That is barely anything for 4 people." "We will manage," Clara said, lifting her chin even as shame burned in her chest. She had been managing for 3 months now, ever since her sister Catherine and brother-in-law had died in a wagon accident on their way back from Tucson. The children had been left in Clara's care, and while she loved them fiercely, loving them did not put food on the table or pay the rent on the small house Catherine and her husband had been leasing at the edge of town. "Let me get that for you, madam." The voice came from behind her, deep and warm like honey in tea. Clara turned to find a tall cowboy standing there, hat in his hands, his sun-bronzed face showing concern rather than pity. He had kind blue eyes that crinkled at the corners, as though he smiled often, and dark brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. He could not have been more than 25 or 26 years old, just a few years older than Clara's own 22 years. "I cannot accept charity, sir," Clara said firmly, though her heart hammered at the kindness in his expression. "It is not charity," he said gently. "It is one neighbor helping another. I am Bennett Cooper, and I just bought the old Harrison Ranch about 5 miles north of town. I have been coming into White River for supplies, and I have seen you with these little ones. They look like they could use some peppermint candy too." Thomas's eyes grew wide with hope, and even Elizabeth perked up, though she remained silent. Margaret simply stared at the stranger with her thumb in her mouth. "Please, I insist," Bennett said, pulling out his wallet. "Mr. Henderson, put back the sugar and coffee and add them to her order, along with some of that dried beef, a bag of beans, and whatever candy the children would like." "Mr. Cooper, this is too much," Clara protested, her face flushing hot with embarrassment and something else she could not quite name. "Is it too much for children to have full bellies?" Bennett asked quietly, and the gentle challenge in his words stopped her protests. He was right, of course. Her pride was not worth more than the children's welfare. "Thank you," she managed, her throat tight. "I will find a way to repay you." "No need," Bennett said, settling his hat back on his head. "But if you are determined to balance the scales, perhaps you could tell me where I might find someone to help with cooking and keeping house. I am living alone out at the ranch, and I am afraid I am burning more meals than I am eating." Clara's mind raced. She had been desperately seeking work, any work, but most establishments in White River were not interested in hiring a woman with 3 children in tow. "I am a good cook," she said carefully. "My sister and I ran our family home in Ohio for years after our mother passed. But I have the children to mind." "Bring them," Bennett said simply. "A ranch house is a good place for children to run around, better than being cooped up in town. You could come a few days a week, prepare some meals, do some light housekeeping. I will pay fair wages." Mr. Henderson finished tallying up the expanded order, and Bennett paid without hesitation. As Clara gathered the supplies, her mind whirled with questions and concerns. She did not know this man, but desperation had a way of making decisions easier. She needed work, and he was offering it without making her feel small or pitiful. "I could start Monday," Clara heard herself saying, "if you are serious about the offer." "I am very serious," Bennett assured her. He helped carry the supplies to her small wagon outside, lifting the heavy sacks as though they weighed nothing. His horse, a beautiful chestnut mare, was tied nearby. "Come around 8 in the morning. I will show you the house and we can work out the details." As he rode away, Elizabeth tugged at Clara's sleeve. "Is he a good man, Aunt Clara?" Clara watched Bennett Cooper's broad shoulders disappear down the dusty street. "I do not know yet, sweetheart, but I think he might be." That night, after the children were finally asleep in the bedroom they all shared, Clara sat at the worn kitchen table and allowed herself a moment of hope. The rent was due in 2 weeks, and she had been lying awake every night trying to figure out how she would manage. This job, if Bennett Cooper was true to his word, might be the answer to her prayers. She thought about his kind eyes and the way he had spoken to the children, not ignoring them the way most adults did, but actually seeing them. Thomas had clutched his peppermint stick like it was made of gold all the way home, and even serious Elizabeth had smiled when Bennett had tipped his hat to her specifically, treating her like a young lady rather than just a child. Monday morning came faster than Clara expected. She dressed in her best day dress, which was not saying much since she only had 3 dresses to her name, and braided her long chestnut hair carefully. She got the children ready, making sure their faces were clean and their clothes were mended, though they were obviously worn and patched in places. The ride out to the Harrison Ranch, which she supposed was now the Cooper Ranch, took nearly an hour in her slow wagon. The old mare that pulled it had seen better days, much like everything else in Clara's life. But the morning was beautiful, with the Arizona sky stretching endless and blue overhead, and the children were excited about the adventure. The ranch came into view as they crested a small rise, and Clara caught her breath. It was more substantial than she had expected, with a good-sized house, a large barn, several corrals, and what looked like a bunkhouse in the distance. Cattle dotted the landscape, grazing peacefully. Bennett emerged from the barn as they approached, wiping his hands on his trousers. He had been working already, she could tell, and he smiled when he saw them. "Right on time. Good morning, Miss Brennan." "Good morning, Mr. Cooper. Please call me Clara, then you must call me Bennett." He helped her down from the wagon and then lifted each child down carefully. "Now, let me show you around." The house was well built but clearly needed a woman's touch. Dishes were piled in the sink, dust covered every surface, and the floor looked like it had not been properly swept in weeks. But it had good bones, as Clara's mother would have said. Large windows let in plenty of light, and the kitchen was spacious with a good stove. "I have been batching it for about 3 weeks now," Bennett admitted, looking sheepish. "I am afraid I let things get away from me. I have been so focused on the livestock and the land that I neglected the house." "It is nothing that cannot be fixed with some elbow grease," Clara assured him. She set Margaret down carefully and turned to Elizabeth. "Can you watch your brother and sister while I talk with Mr. Cooper?" Elizabeth nodded solemnly, taking Thomas's hand. Bennett noticed the exchange and said, "There is a small parlor through that door with some books on the shelf. Nothing too exciting, but there might be something for the children. And the yard out back is fenced, safe for them to play if they want fresh air." Clara felt a rush of gratitude. He was thinking of the children, making sure they were comfortable. It was more consideration than most people had shown them. They settled on terms quickly. Clara would come Monday, Wednesday, and Friday each week. She would cook, clean, and do whatever household tasks needed doing. Bennett would pay her $2 each day she worked, which was generous, more than generous really. He also said she should plan to cook enough for herself and the children to eat while they were there. "No sense in you going hungry while you are cooking for me," he said reasonably. Clara started immediately, rolling up her sleeves and tackling the kitchen first. She sent Bennett back to his ranch work, insisting she did not need supervision. As she worked, she found herself humming, something she had not done since Catherine died. Having a purpose, having work that would actually pay enough to keep them fed and housed, lifted a weight from her shoulders she had been carrying for too long. The children played quietly, still subdued from the grief and upheaval of the past months, but she heard Thomas laugh at something Elizabeth said, and the sound was like music. By midday, Clara had the kitchen sparkling and had started a stew with the supplies she found in Bennett's well-stocked pantry. He had not been exaggerating about needing help with cooking. She found the remains of several burned meals scraped into a bucket by the back door. Bennett came in for the noon meal, and his face lit up when he saw the table set and the stew sending up aromatic steam. "That smells like heaven," he said appreciatively. "I cannot remember the last time I had a proper meal." They sat together, the children eating hungrily, and Clara trying not to notice how her heart did a strange little flutter every time Bennett smiled at something Thomas said. He was good with the children, patient and kind, asking Elizabeth about the book she had been looking at and listening carefully to her shy responses. After lunch, Bennett said, "Clara, I know this is not part of our arrangement, but I have been thinking. The trip back and forth from town is long, especially 3 times a week. There is an old foreman's cottage on the property, just past the barn. It has been empty for a while and needs some cleaning, but it is sturdy. If you wanted to move out here with the children, you would be welcome to use it. No rent, and you could work more days if you wanted, make a bit more money." Clara froze, her hands stilling in the dishwater. "Mr. Cooper, I cannot possibly—" "Bennett," he corrected gently. "And why not? I am offering you a house, not proposing marriage. Though I suppose some folks in town might talk, but they can talk all they want. I know my intentions are honorable, and so do you. This way, the children would have space to play safely. You would not be wearing yourself out with that long drive, and I would have helped more than 3 days a week." It makes practical sense. It did make practical sense, Clara had to admit. The house she was renting in town was cramped and cost most of what little money she had scraped together from selling Catherine's belongings. The landlord had already made noises about raising the rent. And living out here, away from the pitying looks and whispered gossip of White River, sounded like a reprieve. "Could I see the cottage?" she asked cautiously. Bennett's face broke into a wide smile. "Of course. Let me show you right now." The cottage was small but charming, with 2 bedrooms, a main room with a fireplace, and a tiny kitchen. It was dusty and filled with cobwebs, but Clara could see its potential immediately. There were windows on 3 sides letting in light, and a small covered porch out front. Behind it, there was space for a kitchen garden. "The children could have 1 bedroom and you could have the other," Bennett pointed out. "It is more space than you have in town, I would wager." Clara could not argue. She walked through the cottage slowly, her mind racing through possibilities and concerns. It was a big step, moving out to a ranch with a man she barely knew. But staying in town meant watching the children go hungry when her money ran out. It meant constant worry and fear about their future. "I would expect nothing from you beyond the work we agreed on," Bennett said quietly from the doorway. I am offering this as an employer looking out for his employees' welfare. You would have your space and I have mine. But I will be honest with you, Clara. I see those children, and I see how hard you are working to give them a good life. My own mother raised me and my two sisters alone after my father died. I know what it looks like when someone is struggling and too proud to ask for help. So I am offering it, plain and simple. His words struck something deep in Clara's chest. She thought of Thomas asking for candy he knew they could not afford. She thought of Elizabeth's too serious face and the way she tried to help with everything, even though she was only 7. She thought of little Margaret, who barely spoke anymore, grieving her parents in a way she could not express. "We could move in this weekend," Clara said, turning to face Bennett, "if you are certain about this." "I am certain." The rest of the week passed in a blur. Clara gave notice to her landlord, who barely seemed to care, and began packing up their meager belongings. Some of the women in town made pointed comments when they heard she was moving out to the Cooper ranch, but Clara held her head high. She knew her own intentions, and that was enough. Bennett came into town on Saturday with a larger wagon and helped move everything out to the ranch. It took only 2 trips, which made Clara realize just how little they had. But Bennett never commented on it, just worked steadily and kept the children entertained with stories about the ranch animals. By Saturday evening, they were settled in the cottage. Clara had scrubbed it from top to bottom over the past few days during her work time at the main house, and now it gleamed. She had hung curtains she had sewn from some fabric Bennett insisted she take from a trunk in his attic, and she had arranged their few pieces of furniture to make the space feel like home. The children were asleep in their room, exhausted from the excitement and work of moving day. Clara stood on the small porch, watching the sun set over the Arizona landscape, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. She heard footsteps and turned to find Bennett approaching, his hat in his hands. "Just wanted to make sure you have everything you need," he said. "There is wood for the fireplace stacked around the side, and the well is just past the barn, same one the main house uses. We have everything, thank you." Clara hesitated, then said, "Bennett, I want you to know how grateful I am, not just for the job but for this. For seeing us as people instead of a burden or a charity case." "You are neither of those things," Bennett said firmly. "You are a woman doing her best in a hard situation, and those children are lucky to have you." He paused, then added more softly, "I meant what I said about my mother. She worked herself near to death trying to keep us fed and clothed after Pa died. I was about Elizabeth's age. I remember what it felt like to be hungry, to be scared about where we would live. If I can help someone else not have to feel that way, then I am going to do it." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "What happened? With your mother and sisters?" "Ma eventually married again, a good man who treated us like his own. My sisters both married and have families now. Ma and my stepfather have a small farm in Texas. I came out here looking for my own place, my own future." He smiled slightly. "Been on my own for a few years now, working as a ranch hand and saving up until I could buy my own spread." "You did well," Clara said. "This is a beautiful place." "It is getting better every day," Bennett said, and something in his tone made Clara's heart skip. "Good night, Clara. I will see you in the morning." He walked back toward the main house, and Clara watched him go, her feelings confused and complicated. She barely knew this man, and yet he had shown her more kindness than almost anyone in the past 3 months. She thought about his quiet strength, his easy way with the children, his gentle humor. She thought about how safe she felt here, how right it seemed to be on this ranch. Dangerous thoughts for a woman in her position, she told herself firmly. Bennett Cooper was her employer, nothing more. She could not afford to imagine more than that, could not risk the fragile stability they had found. But that night, lying in her own bed in the little cottage, Clara allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to have a partner in this hard life. Someone to share the burdens and the joys. Someone who looked at her the way Bennett sometimes did, like she was capable and strong and worth noticing. The weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm. Clara worked 6 days a week now, handling all the household tasks for the main house and cooking meals that Bennett praised lavishly. He was not exaggerating about his lack of culinary skills, but he was always appreciative and never demanding. The children thrived in the open space of the ranch. Thomas lost the hollow look in his cheeks, and his laughter rang out more frequently as he followed Bennett around, asking endless questions about the cattle and horses. Elizabeth slowly came out of her shell, especially when Bennett brought home a litter of barn kittens and told her she could name them and help care for them. Even Margaret began talking more, calling out Mr. Bennett. When she saw him and running to show him flowers she picked or rocks she found, Clara found herself watching Bennett more than she should, noticing the way he moved with easy confidence, the way he was always patient with the children even when he had a long day's work ahead of him. She noticed how he lit up when he came in for meals and found her in the kitchen. She noticed how he started finding excuses to come back to the house during the day, needing a drink of water or a tool he claimed to have left behind. One evening in late October, nearly 2 months after they had moved to the ranch, Bennett asked Clara to sit with him on the main house porch after the children were in bed. She hesitated, knowing she should go back to the cottage, but something in his expression made her agree. They sat in the rocking chairs, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. For a while, neither spoke, and the silence was comfortable. "Clara," Bennett finally said, "I want to talk to you about something, and I hope you will hear me out before you answer." Her heart began to race. "All right. These past couple of months, having you and the children here, have been the best of my life," he said quietly. "This house feels like a home now. I wake up looking forward to the day because I know you will be there. I love hearing the children play and laugh. I love seeing what you have cooked for dinner. I love talking with you in the evenings." He paused, then turned to look at her directly. "I am falling in love with you, Clara. Maybe I have been since that first day in the general store. And I know this is complicated, and I know you might not feel the same way, but I had to tell you the truth." Clara's breath caught in her throat. She had suspected he might have feelings for her, had hoped and feared it in equal measure. But hearing him say it out loud, so plainly and honestly, made it real in a way that terrified and thrilled her. "Bennett, she stopped, unsure how to continue. "I am not in a position to be courted properly. I have 3 children to care for, no money of my own. You deserve someone who can come to you freely, not someone who might seem like she is agreeing because she needs the security you provide." "You have feelings for me?" Bennett asked directly. "Put aside everything else. Do you feel anything for me beyond gratitude?" Clara looked at him, at his honest face and hopeful eyes, and she could not lie. "Yes," she whispered. "I do. I think about you all the time. I find myself listening for your footsteps, looking forward to seeing you. When you laugh at something I say, I feel warm all over." "But Bennett, how can I know if what I feel is real or just relief at being cared for?" "Time," Bennett said simply. "We will take our time. I am not asking you to marry me tonight, Clara. I am just telling you how I feel and asking if I might court you properly. I want to take you to the church social next month. I want to sit with you in the evenings and talk about our days. I want to get to know you, and I want you to know me. Then we will see where we stand." "What about the children?" Clara asked. "They have already lost so much." "If we started something and it did not work out, it will work out," Bennett said with quiet confidence. "But if you need certainty, If you need promises, I will give them to you. I am not just courting you, Clara. I am choosing all of you, including Thomas and Elizabeth and Margaret. If you let me, I want to be a father to them. I want to give them a real home, a stable life. I want them to know they are loved and wanted. Tears streamed down Clara's face now. That is all I have wanted for them, to feel safe and loved again. Then let me help you give them that, Bennett said, reaching over to take her hand. Let me court you proper and we will see where this leads. But I already know, Clara. I already know this is what I want, what I have been looking for without even realizing it. You and those children, you are my future. Clara squeezed his hand, her heart full to bursting. Yes, she said. Yes, you may court me. Bennett's smile could have lit up the entire ranch. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. Thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank you for seeing us when everyone else looked away, Clara replied. They sat together for a long time, holding hands and talking about everything and nothing. Clara learned that Bennett's favorite color was the blue of the Arizona sky at dawn. He learned that Clara missed Ohio sometimes but loved the wide open spaces of the territory. They talked about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. By the time Clara finally made her way back to the cottage, she felt like she had known Bennett forever instead of just 2 months. The courtship was unlike anything Clara had imagined. Bennett was attentive and romantic, but always respectful of propriety. He brought her wildflowers from the range. He taught Thomas how to ride a gentle mare. He sat with Elizabeth while she read aloud from books he bought in town. He carved little wooden animals for Margaret. They went to the church social in November, and Clara felt the eyes of the town on them. Some looked disapproving, others curious, but Bennett never wavered. He kept his hand lightly on the small of her back and introduced her as the woman I am courting with pride in his voice. Mrs. Henderson, the shopkeeper's wife, approached them with a smile. It is good to see you looking so well, Miss Brennan. And you too, Mr. Cooper. This town could use more happy stories. Not everyone was as kind. A few of the church ladies made pointed comments about propriety and young women living alone on ranches with unmarried men. Bennett heard one of them, a sour-faced woman named Mrs. Pritchard, say something particularly nasty, and he stepped forward with unusual firmness. Mrs. Pritchard, I understand you have concerns, but let me be clear. Clara Brennan is a woman of impeccable character who is working hard to provide for her sister's children. She lives in a separate cottage on my property, and our arrangement is entirely proper. If you or anyone else has a problem with that, I suggest you keep it to yourself. This town should be supporting a woman like her, not tearing her down with gossip. Mrs. Pritchard turned red and hurried away. Clara felt a rush of warmth toward Bennett for defending her so staunchly. As winter approached, Clara realized just how deep her feelings for Bennett had grown. He was everything she had not dared to hope for, kind and strong and gentle. He made her laugh when she was tired. He held her when she cried on the anniversary of Catherine's death. He never pressured her for more than she was ready to give. In early December, Bennett took Clara into town alone, having arranged for one of his ranch hands to watch the children for a few hours. They walked through the general store and Bennett steered her toward the fabric section. Pick out whatever you like, he said. I want you to have a new dress, something pretty that is just for you. Bennett, I cannot, you can, and you will, he said firmly but gently. You deserve nice things, Clara. Let me give them to you. She finally chose a deep green fabric that reminded her of pine trees. Bennett also insisted on lace for trim and new ribbons for her hair. As Mr. Henderson tallied up the purchase, Bennett added several other items Clara had not noticed him gathering. Warm winter coats for all 3 children, new boots for Thomas whose old ones were pinching his growing feet, and a beautiful doll for Margaret. "Christmas is coming," Bennett said when Clara protested. "Every child should have something special." That night, after the children were asleep and Clara was sewing her new dress by lamplight, Bennett knocked on the cottage door. She let him in, surprised to see him looking nervous. "I could not wait until Christmas," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. "I have been carrying this around for 2 weeks, and I keep telling myself to be patient, but I cannot wait any longer." Clara's heart began to pound as Bennett sank to one knee on her humble cottage floor. "Clara Brennan, I love you with everything in me. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you love those children. I love your laugh and your determination and the way you hum when you are cooking. I want to spend every day for the rest of my life making you happy. Will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband and a father to Thomas and Elizabeth and Margaret?" Clara dropped the dress she was sewing and knelt in front of him, taking his face in her hands. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Bennett, I will marry you. I love you so much." He slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple gold band with a small diamond that sparkled in the lamplight. Then he kissed her for the first time, gentle and sweet and full of promise. "I want to do this right," Bennett said when they finally pulled apart. "A proper wedding in the church, with the children there, making it official that we are a family." "When?" Clara asked, too happy to care about long engagements. "As soon as possible," Bennett said with a grin. "I have waited my whole life for you, Clara. I do not want to wait any longer than necessary." They decided on a date in early January, giving them time to make arrangements but not waiting too long. Clara wrote to Bennett's mother in Texas, and the reply came back quickly, full of joy and congratulations. Bennett's mother, Martha, said she and his stepfather would make the journey for the wedding, and his sisters would come too if possible. The children were overjoyed when Bennett and Clara told them together. "Does this mean Mr. Bennett will be our papa now?" Thomas asked, his eyes wide with hope. "If you want me to be," Bennett said seriously, looking at each child in turn. "I would be honored to be your papa. I will always tell you about your real father and make sure you remember him and your mother, but I will love you and care for you like you are my own. Is that all right with you?" Elizabeth burst into tears and threw her arms around Bennett's neck. Margaret climbed into his lap and refused to move. Thomas nodded vigorously, too emotional to speak. Clara watched the scene through her own tears, marveling at how much had changed since that day in the general store just 4 months ago. She had been desperate and scared, barely holding on. Now she was planning a wedding to a man she loved deeply, and the children had a father figure who truly cared for them. The weeks leading up to the wedding were busy and happy. Bennett's family arrived 3 days before the ceremony. His mother, Martha, was a warm, energetic woman in her 50s who immediately took Clara under her wing. "He is a good man, my Bennett," Martha said as she helped Clara with alterations to her wedding dress. Clara had used the green fabric Bennett bought her, and with Martha's skilled hands helping, it was turning into something beautiful. "His father was good too, but we did not have enough time together. I am glad Bennett found you, someone who understands what it is like to build a life from hardship." Bennett's sisters, Anne and Louise, were delightful young women who doted on the children and shared embarrassing stories about Bennett's childhood that made everyone laugh. His stepfather, Harold, was quiet but kind, and Clara could see why Martha had chosen him. He treated Bennett like a son, with obvious pride and affection. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, perfect January weather. Clara dressed carefully in her green gown, and Martha styled her hair with the new ribbons Bennett had bought. Elizabeth wore a new dress too, pale blue, and she helped Margaret get ready. Thomas stood proud in new trousers and a shirt that Bennett had given him. The small church in White River was full of people, more than Clara had expected. Many of the ranch hands from neighboring properties had come, along with townspeople who had grown to respect Clara's determination and Bennett's kindness. Even some of the women who had gossiped about their arrangement showed up, won over by the obviously true love between them. Clara walked down the aisle with Thomas on one side and Elizabeth on the other, Margaret holding Elizabeth's hand. Bennett had insisted that the children be part of every moment, that this wedding was about all of them becoming a family. Bennett stood at the front of the church looking handsome in a new suit, his eyes never leaving Clara's face as she approached. When she reached him, he took her hand and whispered, "You are beautiful." The ceremony was simple but meaningful. The pastor spoke about love and commitment, about the instant family being formed, about the blessing of second chances. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Bennett kissed Clara tenderly while the church erupted in applause. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the barn decorated with winter greenery. Martha and Bennett's sisters had prepared an amazing feast, and there was music and dancing. Bennett danced with Clara first, then with each of the girls. He taught Thomas how to dance properly, the boy standing on his feet. As the sun set and the guests began to leave, Clara found herself standing with Bennett watching the children play with some other young ones from town. His arm was around her waist, and she leaned into his warmth. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. "Happier than I knew was possible," Clara replied honestly. 4 months ago, I was trying to figure out how to feed 3 children with $1.70. Now I am married to the most wonderful man I have ever met, and those children have a real home and a father who loves them. "I am the lucky one," Bennett said. "I was living alone in that big house, cooking terrible food and wondering what I was working so hard for. Now I have a wife I adore and 3 amazing children. I have a purpose beyond just building up a ranch. I have a family." They had agreed that on their wedding night, the children would stay in the main house with Bennett's family, giving Clara and Bennett privacy in the cottage. It felt strange to Clara, walking to the cottage without the children, but Bennett held her hand and made her feel safe. Inside, he had lit candles and built up the fire so the small house was warm and welcoming. He kissed her gently, then pulled back to look at her seriously. "I want you to know that I will always take care of you," he said. "Not because you need taking care of, but because I want to. Because loving you means sharing all the burdens and all the joys. You will never have to face anything alone again." "Neither will you," Clara promised. "We are partners now, in everything." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, full of whispered words and gentle touches. Clara had been nervous, but Bennett was patient and loving, making sure she felt cherished. When she fell asleep in his arms later, she felt complete in a way she never had before. The next months were an adjustment as they all learned to live together as a true family. The children moved into the main house, each having their own bedroom for the first time in their lives. Clara and Bennett took the large master bedroom, and the house felt full of life and love. Bennett legally adopted the children in March, a process made easier by the fact that no other family had come forward to claim them. Clara stood in the courthouse watching him sign the papers, officially becoming Thomas and Elizabeth and Margaret's father, and she cried tears of joy. "They are Coopers now," Bennett said proudly, gathering all 3 children into his arms. "My son and daughters." Spring brought new life to the ranch. The cattle had calves, the horses had foals, and the garden Clara planted behind the main house began to flourish. Thomas followed Bennett everywhere, learning ranch work and growing stronger and more confident every day. Elizabeth continued to blossom, joining the school in White River and making friends. Margaret, now 4 years old, was talking constantly and bringing joy to everyone with her sunny personality. In May, Clara realized she had missed her monthly courses and felt a familiar nausea in the mornings. She waited to be sure before telling Bennett, but after another month passed, she could not hide her suspicion any longer. "I think I might be expecting," she told him one evening as they sat together on the porch, watching the children play in the yard. Bennett's face went through a series of emotions, surprise, joy, wonder, before settling on pure happiness. "Truly, we are going to have a baby, I believe so. I will need to see the doctor to be certain, but all the signs are there." Bennett pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Another blessing," he said softly, "as if I needed more reasons to thank God every day." The doctor confirmed it the following week. Clara was about 2 months along, which meant the baby would arrive sometime in January. The children were excited when they were told, each reacting in their own way. Thomas wanted to know if it would be a brother so he could teach him about ranching. Elizabeth immediately started planning how she would help care for the baby. Margaret simply said, "Good. I want a baby," in her matter-of-fact way. As Clara's pregnancy progressed, Bennett was attentive and careful, insisting she rest more and take on fewer tasks. He hired a woman from town, a widow named Mrs. Fletcher, to help with the housework so Clara would not overdo it. "You took care of everyone else for so long," Bennett said, when Clara protested that she could still manage her usual work. "Let me take care of you now." The summer was hot but happy. They had a celebration on the 4th of July, inviting neighboring ranchers and their families for a barbecue and fireworks that Bennett had ordered from Tucson. Clara, her belly growing round, watched Bennett play with the children and interact easily with their neighbors, and she marveled at how fully he had embraced this life. "He is a good man, your husband," Mrs. Fletcher said, following Clara's gaze. "You can see he loves those children like they were born to him." "He does," Clara agreed. "They are lucky to have him. We all are." In August, they received word that Bennett's sister Anne had given birth to her first child, a girl. Bennett was delighted to become an uncle, and he immediately started talking about taking the family to Texas to visit once their own baby was old enough to travel. "I want our children to know their cousins," he said. "I want them to have a big, loving family." Clara thought about how alone she and Catherine had been after their parents died, just the two sisters against the world. Now she was part of a large, welcoming family, and her children would grow up with aunts and uncles and cousins and grandparents. It was more than she had ever dreamed possible. The harvest season was busy on the ranch. Bennett worked long days getting everything ready for winter, and Clara helped as much as she could while being careful of the baby. They hired extra hands for the season, and the ranch prospered. Bennett had a good eye for cattle and had made smart decisions about which animals to keep and which to sell. "We are doing well," he told Clara one evening as they went over the ranch accounts together. "Better than I expected for the first year. If things continue like this, we will be able to expand next year, maybe buy some more land from the neighbor to the east." "You have worked so hard," Clara said proudly. "You should be pleased with what you have built." "What we have built," Bennett corrected. "This is ours, Clara. Everything I have is yours and the children's. We are building this together." As fall turned to winter, Clara grew heavy with the baby. The children were wonderfully helpful, Thomas carrying wood for the fireplaces, Elizabeth helping with cooking, Margaret fetching things so Clara did not have to get up and down constantly. Bennett fussed over her like a mother hen, making sure she was comfortable and had everything she needed. "I am not made of glass," Clara laughed when he insisted on carrying her up the stairs one evening. "No, but you are carrying something precious," Bennett replied. "Our child, Clara. Let me take care of you." On a cold January night, 2 days before their first anniversary, Clara woke with the first pains of labor. Bennett immediately sent for the doctor and the midwife, then stayed by Clara's side, holding her hand and wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. The labor was long but not overly difficult. As dawn broke on a new day, Clara brought a healthy baby boy into the world. Bennett cut the cord with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his son. "He is perfect," Bennett breathed. "You are amazing, Clara. You did so well." They named him William Harold Cooper, William for Clara's father and Harold for Bennett's stepfather. Little William had a strong set of lungs and a head of dark hair like his father. The children came in to meet their new brother, each taking turns holding him carefully with adult supervision. "He is so small," Thomas said in wonder, gently touching William's tiny hand. "You were that small once," Clara told him. "You all were." "We will take good care of him," Elizabeth promised solemnly. "We will be the best big brother and sisters." Those first weeks with a newborn were exhausting but joyful. Bennett took on more of the nighttime duties, insisting Clara needed rest to recover. He would walk the floor with William when the baby was fussy, singing soft songs and telling him stories about the ranch he would grow up on. Clara would wake sometimes in the middle of the night to find Bennett's side of the bed empty. She would pad softly to the nursery they had set up in what used to be a storage room and find Bennett in the rocking chair, William asleep on his chest, both of them peaceful and content. Her heart would swell with love at the sight. By the time William was 2 months old, a routine had been established. Clara was managing well, and the older children had adjusted to having a baby in the house. Bennett hired another hand to help with the ranch work, so he could spend more time with his family. One evening in March, as they celebrated Thomas's 7th birthday, Clara looked around the table at her family. Thomas was telling a story about something funny that had happened at school, making everyone laugh. Elizabeth was carefully serving cake, taking her role as oldest sister seriously. Margaret was trying to feed William a piece of cake, despite being told repeatedly that he was too young for such things. Bennett was at the head of the table, his eyes twinkling with amusement and love. This was everything Clara had hoped for when she took custody of her sister's children. A warm home, full bellies, laughter, safety, love. But it was also so much more than she had dared to dream. She had found a partner who loved her completely, who had taken on her burdens without hesitation and turned them into blessings. "What are you thinking about?" Bennett asked later when the children were in bed, and they sat together in the parlor, William asleep in the cradle nearby. "I am thinking about how different my life is from a year and a half ago," Clara said. "How different all our lives are. If someone had told me then that I would be sitting here now, married to you, with a son of our own and 3 happy, thriving children, I would not have believed them." "Do you remember what I said that first day in the general store?" Bennett asked. "You offered to help with my groceries." "Before that, I said I had seen you with the children and they looked like they could use some peppermint candy." Bennett smiled at the memory. "I had been watching you for a few days, Clara, seeing you struggle, seeing how hard you were trying. I wanted to help, but I did not know how to approach you without offending your pride. When I saw you counting out those coins, looking so worried, I knew it was my chance." "So you made up that story about needing a cook and housekeeper?" Clara asked, realization dawning. "Not entirely made up," Bennett admitted sheepishly. "I really was terrible at cooking and the house was a mess, but I probably could have managed if I had to. I just saw an opportunity to help you and give myself a reason to get to know you better. I was drawn to you from the first moment I saw you. I was so desperate that day," Clara remembered. "I did not know how I was going to feed the children. I was trying to decide which of us could go without meals." "You never have to worry about that again," Bennett said firmly, taking her hand. "This ranch is doing well, and it will only get better. Our children will never go hungry. They will have opportunities and education and a future." "Because of you," Clara said softly. "Because of us," Bennett corrected. "You are the heart of this family, Clara. You hold us all together." As spring turned to summer, life on the ranch continued to flourish. William grew strong and healthy, reaching all his milestones. Thomas was becoming quite the little rancher, able to ride well and help with simple tasks. Elizabeth discovered a love of cooking and spent hours with Clara learning recipes. Margaret was in school now too, bringing home papers she was proud of. Bennett's predictions about the ranch proved accurate. They bought the additional land from the neighbor and expanded their herd. They hired 2 more permanent hands and built a new bunkhouse. The main house got some additions too, including a larger kitchen and a proper dining room that could seat all of them comfortably plus guests. In October, Bennett surprised Clara with a trip to Tucson, just the 2 of them, leaving the children with Mrs. Fletcher and the ranch hands for 2 days. It was the first time they had been alone together since William was born, and it felt like a second honeymoon. "I wanted to remind you that you are more than just a mother and a rancher's wife," Bennett said as they walked through the streets of Tucson, stopping in shops and having dinner at a nice restaurant. "You are my wife, the woman I love, and you deserve to be romanced and spoiled." "I do not need grand gestures to know you love me," Clara said. "I see it every day in the way you are with the children, the way you work to provide for us, the way you look at me when you think I am not noticing." "Oh, I want you to notice," Bennett said with a grin. "I want everyone to notice. I want the whole world to know how much I love Clara Cooper." That night, in the privacy of their hotel room, they reconnected as husband and wife, remembering what had drawn them together beyond their love for the children. It was passionate and tender, a renewal of their commitment to each other. When they returned home, the children rushed to greet them, and William cried until Clara picked him up. The house felt complete again with everyone together, and Clara realized this was what home truly meant, not just a place, but the people you loved gathered under one roof. The years began to pass in a blur of happiness. William learned to walk and talk, becoming a rambunctious toddler who kept everyone on their toes. Thomas grew into a responsible young man who had a real talent for working with horses. Elizabeth continued to be the steady, reliable one, helping care for her younger siblings and excelling in school. Margaret was creative and dreamy, always drawing pictures or making up stories. In the spring of 1886, Clara discovered she was expecting again. Bennett was overjoyed, and the children were excited about another sibling. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because Clara was not worried about money or stability or the future. She was simply able to enjoy the experience of growing another life. Their daughter, Catherine Elizabeth Cooper, was born in December of that year. They named her for Clara's sister and for Elizabeth, honoring the past and the present. Little Catherine had her mother's chestnut hair and her father's blue eyes, and she was doted on by everyone in the family. "2 of our own and 3 we chose," Bennett said, holding Catherine while watching the older children play in the snow outside. "We have a good life, Clara." "The best life," Clara agreed, leaning against his shoulder. As the children grew, the ranch grew with them. Thomas, at 12 years old, was able to do nearly as much work as the hired hands. Bennett started teaching him about the business side of ranching, wanting him to be prepared to take over someday if that was what he wanted. Elizabeth, at 14, was a beautiful and capable young woman who had several boys from town sweet on her. Bennett took his role as protective father seriously, vetting any young man who came calling and making sure Elizabeth knew her own worth. Margaret, at 11, had discovered a talent for healing and helped the ranch doctor when animals were sick or injured. She talked about maybe becoming a real doctor someday, an ambitious dream for a girl, but one Bennett and Clara encouraged. William, at 5, was all energy and mischief, and Catherine, at 2, followed him everywhere, trying to keep up with her big brother. In 1889, they received word that Bennett's mother Martha was ill. The whole family made the journey to Texas, a long trip, but one they felt was important. Martha rallied when she saw them all, delighted to meet the new grandchildren and see how much the older ones had grown. "You did good, son," Martha told Bennett during a quiet moment. "You have a beautiful family and a good life. I am proud of you." "I learned from the best," Bennett said, squeezing her hand. "You showed me what it means to sacrifice for your children, to do whatever it takes to give them a good life. I am just following your example." Martha recovered from that illness and was able to visit the ranch the following year, staying for 2 months and creating memories the children would treasure forever. She taught the girls her recipes and told stories about Bennett's childhood that made him turn red with embarrassment and everyone else laugh until their sides hurt. As the new decade began, the ranch was thriving beyond Bennett's initial dreams. They now had one of the largest herds in the territory and a reputation for quality cattle. Bennett had invested wisely, and they were financially secure in a way that still amazed Clara sometimes. "You remember when I had $1.70 and thought that was all we would ever have?" Clara said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, something that had become their ritual after the children were in bed. "I remember," Bennett said. "I remember thinking you were the bravest person I had ever met, trying to provide for 3 children on almost nothing." "I was terrified," Clara admitted. "Every single day I was scared we would end up on the streets or that someone would decide I was not capable of caring for the children and take them away." "But you never let them see your fear," Bennett said. "You were strong for them always. And then you came along and made it possible for me to not just survive but actually live," Clara said, taking his hand. "You gave us everything, Bennett." "You gave me just as much," Bennett insisted. "More, maybe. You gave me a purpose, a family, a reason to build something lasting. Before I met you, I was just going through the motions. Now every day means something." In 1891, their 3rd child together was born, another boy they named James after Bennett's father. The older children were wonderful with the new baby, and Thomas especially took his role as big brother seriously, protective and loving. Elizabeth had finished her schooling and was helping run the household, learning from Clara how to manage a large ranch house. She had several suitors, but none had caught her interest enough to pursue seriously. "I want what you and Papa have," she told Clara one day as they worked together in the kitchen. "I want someone who truly sees me and loves me for who I am. I am not settling for less." "Good," Clara said firmly. "You should never settle. Wait for someone who makes you feel cherished and respected." Margaret was still determined to be a doctor and was reading every medical text she could get her hands on. Bennett had made inquiries about medical schools back east that might accept a female student, determined to support his daughter's dreams. William was 7 now and in school, proving to be a quick learner with a particular aptitude for mathematics. Catherine was 5 and following her big sister Margaret everywhere, wanting to be just like her. The family had grown, and the house had grown with it. They had added more rooms over the years, expanded the barns, and improved the land. The ranch that Bennett had bought as a struggling cowboy's dream was now one of the most successful operations in the territory. But success had not changed them. Bennett still worked alongside his hands, still came in for meals dusty and tired and smiling. Clara still cooked and cared for the house, though she now had help. They still sat together every evening, talking about their day and making plans for the future. One evening in 1892, as they celebrated their 10-year anniversary, Bennett presented Clara with a beautiful locket. Inside were tiny photographs of all 6 children. 10 years ago, I married the woman of my dreams, Bennett said as he fastened the locket around her neck. You have given me everything I could ever want, Clara. A home, a family, a life full of love and purpose. You saved us, Clara said, tears in her eyes. You took a desperate woman and 3 grieving children and gave us a life beyond anything I could have imagined. We saved each other, Bennett corrected. I was alone and lonely, working toward a future that felt empty. You and the children filled that emptiness. You made everything worthwhile. They danced in the parlor that night to music from the gramophone Bennett had bought, the same way they had danced at their wedding. Through the doorway, they could see the older children playing a game with the younger ones, all of them laughing and happy. Do you ever think about that day in the general store? Clara asked as they swayed together. All the time, Bennett admitted. I think about how close I came to not speaking up, to just watching you leave and never knowing what I was missing. I think about how different all our lives would be if I had stayed silent. But you did not stay silent, Clara said. You saw us, really saw us, when most people looked away. And you decided to help. Best decision I ever made, Bennett said, kissing her softly. As the years continued to pass, the family evolved. Thomas fell in love with a rancher's daughter named Sarah from a neighboring property. They married when he was 20, and Bennett deeded them a portion of the ranch to start their own spread. Within 2 years, Thomas and Sarah had a son, making Clara and Bennett grandparents for the first time. We are too young to be grandparents, Clara protested, though she was delighted with baby Benjamin. Speak for yourself, Bennett teased. I am distinguished. You are 39, Clara laughed. That is hardly ancient. Elizabeth finally found her match at 18, a lawyer from Tucson named David who treated her like a queen. They had a big wedding at the ranch, with people coming from all over the territory. Clara cried watching her adopted daughter walk down the aisle, remembering the scared 7-year-old who had arrived on the ranch all those years ago. Margaret got accepted to medical school in Philadelphia, a rare achievement for a woman. Bennett and Clara were incredibly proud, though they knew they would miss her terribly. Before she left, Margaret thanked them both for believing in her. Most parents would have told me to give up such an unrealistic dream, she said, but you encouraged me every step of the way. I will make you proud. You already have, Bennett assured her. We have always been proud of you. William decided he wanted to study agriculture and animal husbandry at the Territorial University. He had a scientific mind and wanted to bring modern ranching techniques to the family business. Bennett supported him fully, excited to see what William would learn. Catherine, at 14, was showing an interest in teaching and working with children. She helped at the schoolhouse in town and was beloved by all her young students. James, at 6, was still young enough that his future was unclear, but he showed signs of having inherited his father's way with horses and his mother's kind heart. In 1898, Bennett and Clara sat on their porch on a warm spring evening, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Thomas and Sarah had 3 children now, and Elizabeth and David had 2. Margaret was still in medical school back east but wrote often. William was excelling at university. Catherine was engaged to a local rancher's son. James was growing tall and strong. We have come a long way from that day in the general store, Clara said, echoing the conversation they had had so many times over the years. 16 years, Bennett marveled. Sometimes it feels like yesterday and sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago. Both, Clara said. It is both. So much has happened, but I can still remember exactly what it felt like to be that scared woman with 3 children and barely enough money for flour. And I can remember exactly what it felt like to see you for the first time and know that my life was about to change," Bennett added. "I did not know how or why, but I knew. Something in my heart recognized you." "Do you have any regrets?" Clara asked. "Any moments where you wished you had chosen a different path?" "Not a single one," Bennett said firmly. "Not one moment, not one decision. Every choice led me here, to you, to this life we built together." "How could I regret that?" Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, watching their grandchildren chase each other around the yard, their laughter floating on the evening breeze. "I love you, Bennett Cooper. I have loved you since that day you offered to help me, maybe even before that, from the moment you spoke with such kindness to my children. And I love you, Clara Cooper. I have loved you from the moment I saw you trying so hard to be strong. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the Arizona sky in brilliant colors. The ranch spread out before them, prosperous and beautiful. The house behind them was full of love and memories. Their children and grandchildren surrounded them, creating the next generation of the family they had built together. From desperate beginnings, they had created something lasting and true. A woman alone with 3 children and a cowboy who saw her struggle and decided to help had built a legacy of love that would endure for generations. It was not a story of rescue, though it had started that way. It was a story of 2 people choosing each other every single day, building a life together through hard work, commitment, and love that never wavered. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Bennett took Clara's hand, and she squeezed it gently. They did not need words anymore, not after all these years. They simply sat together, grateful for every moment that had brought them to this perfect evening, this perfect life. Their story had begun with a chance encounter and an offer of help. It had grown into something neither could have predicted, a love so deep and true that it had transformed not just their own lives but the lives of everyone around them. The scared children who had lost their parents had grown into confident, successful adults. The desperate woman who did not know how she would survive had become the heart of a thriving family. The lonely cowboy who had taken a chance on helping a stranger had found his purpose and his home. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask for, to find the person who made them whole, to build a life together that honored both their past struggles and their present blessings, and to know that their love would echo through the generations to come, a testament to the power of kindness, courage, and choosing to love fully and without reservation. As night fell completely over the ranch, Clara and Bennett finally went inside, hand in hand, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring, knowing they would face it together, just as they had faced every challenge and celebrated every joy for the past 16 years. Their love story, born in desperation and nurtured through dedication, had bloomed into something beautiful and eternal, a reminder that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the simple words, "Let me help you."